إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا مزيدا إلى يوم الدين أما بعد.
This is an important topic because this topic is the identity of a Muslim. Let me repeat. Wala' bara is the identity of a Muslim. Wala' bara is the selfhood of a Muslim. Without this topic fully embedded in your hearts, especially in non-Muslim lands, the grandparents and great-grandparents of today are given birth to future non-Muslim grandkids and great-grandkids. Whoa, what? Let me repeat that to you. Listen closely. Without true belief and understanding of wala and bara for everyone, but more so for those in non-Muslim lands, for everyone, the grandparents and great-grandparents, us, we're going to have kids inshallah, and great-grandkids and the grandparents and great-grandparents of today are giving birth to future non-Muslim grandkids and great-grandkids. What do you mean? Let me tell you what I mean over here. Let me tell you this example, you understand it. A family I know very well, and I could even name the names. In 1920 or so, two brothers came to this country from Jordan. One of them settled and one of them returned. One who returned, he didn't like it here or didn't go well for him, he returned. The one of them stayed here. So now that one who stayed here, there's possibly 4 or 5 generations now, since it's the 1920s. The great-grandfather who returned to Jordan, his descendants overall are all Muslim. They all have the spirit of Islam. At the end of the day, you ask them, they'll tell you we're Muslim. Yes, some of them are astray, some of them are sinners, but inshallah they all have tawheed la ilaha illallah in their hearts, and inshallah one day they'll come back to the true teachings. The brother who remained in this country and died here, and most of his first generation children I believe are all dead now. There's now 4 to 5 generations from that man. They grew up in a city, and there's so many of them, that a city in the United States is named after them. Do you know from the descendants of that man who remained in this country from the 1920s, there's not a single one who says, I'm a Muslim? I'm not saying that they neglected their salah so they're not Muslim. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you ask them, what's your religion? He's either Christian or Catholic or Buddhist or Hindu or atheist. A lot of them are atheists. This is something I know firsthand with names and details. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide them back to Tawheed and Islam. We gotta ask why. We spoke many times that non-Muslims can never be compelled to say La ilaha illallah. It's impossible. La ikraha fi din. Even when Islam is ruling a nation and there's non-Muslim living under it, it's impossible that we force or coerce anyone into Islam. Impossible. Even when the rulers of that country are by the solid Sharia, the ideal Khilafah. They even get protection from Muslims, the utmost protection, while they're on their false belief. Non-Muslims get treated under Muslim rule better than they treat us when we're under their rule. Non-Muslims get treated under Muslim rule better than their own people treat them when they're under their own people's rule. That's when there's the ideal Khilafah. But at the same time, and here's what I'm trying to get at, that treatment doesn't mean we approve or condone their false, tampered, made up belief. We treat, for example, Ahl al-Dhimma, those who live under Muslim rule, And you know they're weak and vulnerable because they're living under Muslim rule. A lot of Muslims are the popular and the strong ones. They live under Muslim rules. At times, the Muslims got to protect them. But we teach our kids and we put in our hearts that their faith is false faith. We embed it in our hearts, in our minds, in our kids' minds. That cross that they're wearing, if someone dies believing in it, they will be emblazoned in hell forever. You have to teach that. You have to know that. You have to solidly believe that. When you have Muslims that are taught that the faith have minor differences amongst them, that they downplay the difference in belief in shirk and tawheed. It's not a biggie. They say we're all going to heaven. Your religion, my religion, same God. We're all going to heaven, so nothing really matters. They say Jesus is the Son of God, Isa is the Son of God. We say He's the Messenger of God. It really means the same thing. When you get down to it, it's really a technical linguistic difference. When you boil it down, where all the Abrahamic religions and all the Quran said it, everyone's going to heaven. It's in the Quran. And they falsify this and tamper. The deviants also say explicitly or implicitly, anyone who mentions hell or anyone who's going to hell, that someone's going to hell, that's a radical extremist. Hell, Jahannam these days, without wala and bara, has become to many like an abandoned dwelling that no one enters. It's just there to be there. No one's going to hell. It's as if Allah, ma'adallah, created it in vain. That's basically what they're saying. Ma'adallah. Ta'ala Allah an dhalik uluwan kabir. What's the result of that distorted teaching? The first generation of Muslims without wala and bara will hold some ground to la ilaha illallah. Possibly. Second generation, third generation possibly, may have the smell of la ilaha illallah. The fourth, fifth, and ongoing will be atheists, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, Scientologists, whatever you want. They have it without wala and bara. That's all because of the deficiency in wala and bara. Because it's your religious identity. That's what it is. Wala and bara is our religious uniqueness as Muslims. Wala and bara is our personality. 15 years ago, I was at a lecture, and a famous lecturer gave a very popular talk that he always goes around giving about Islam's history. Early on, Muslims in this country, and early on masajid. He had a projector with pictures of old masajid. That particular lecture was about Muslims who came from overseas as slaves and those who embraced Islam in this country. And he had some real solid evidence of the existence of Islam very early on. Everyone was so happy to hear the masajid back in the 1800s, or even, I don't remember, before that or after that. And after the lecture, we sat down to eat. I said that those masajid are gone. But where are those communities of Muslims? Where are the Muslims? Where are the descendants of those Muslims that you've been talking about for the past hour and a half? I know and I understand that structures in masajid burn down, they fall, they deteriorate over time. But what masjid did the congregation transfer to? Where on earth are those people you're talking about? Where are their descendants? Those Muslims you were talking about in the 1800s, they're all barren. They didn't have no kids that we can see today. If they're barren, I can understand that. They didn't have kids, so that means there's no Muslim kids out of them that came. According to the numbers that he was talking about, for example, the overwhelming majority of African American are supposed to be Muslim. And there's more than that from other origins. Muslims should be way more than that. I want to know where they're at. It's impossible that they all were barren, they couldn't conceive kids. He said, that's a good question, I don't know. There should be studies done on that. I said, don't you think over the decades, in the centuries, they were washed out of Islam? You don't really I'm going to save you some time. You don't got to do no studies. Don't you think they were washed out of time? No wala and bara embedded in their hearts? And look at this. If this was back in the days where there was merely no wala and bara due to ignorance, imagine how it is today and what your kids are going to be are going to turn out to be when it's not only ignorance in wala and bara, it's a full-blown war on the teachings of la ilaha illallah and wala and bara. The bombshells fallen on wala and bara by those who claim to be of our own, claiming to be Muslim and dua and shuyukh, are more dangerous, more lethal than the bombshells that fall on the heads of the innocent brothers and sisters throughout the world. Wallah al-azim. Wallah al-azim, there's a war on wala and bara. Wallah al-azim. Don't get me wrong. Enemies of Islam, they always had an issue with Islam. And they always had an issue with wala and bara. It's nothing new and it's nothing to be surprised about. But now the problem is with the munafiqeen of our ummah that claim to be followers of this ummah, who are spreading a contaminated form of wala and bara, a lethal dosage of wala and bara that's going to take you out of your Islam. Locally, my father was a founder of a local masjid. He took the responsibility of that masjid and he was at the core of changing it. It was built in the 30s. But my father, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant him a long life full of deeds, was a main person in charge of it in the 60s and the 70s, along with a sheikh from Yemen, who was one of the first graduates of the Islamic University of Medina and came here as a da'iyah. May Allah raise his rank to Firdaus. As I heard, he died recently. And he left me some books when I was a young boy to read. One of them was Kitab al-Tawheed. The upper floor of that masjid was a masjid. The bottom was a wedding hall where they have music and parties, and at times alcohol was served in it. My father and this imam went over the masjid and changed it to a masjid, upper and basement of it. I remember my father would go make salah and sit from Maghrib to Isha. And on a good Jum'ah, not on a good day, on a good Jum'ah, there would be 3 to 4 old men. And my father would be the youngest and I was the only kid. At times, I remember when they would sit in Maghrib and Isha and there was parties downstairs, the old man would go downstairs. Wallah, I remember. They would go downstairs and tell them to lower the music for 5 minutes so they can offer Maghrib or Isha. Wallahi, I remember it as a kid. The names and families of the founders of that masjid in the 30s, we know. I just want you to do one thing. Go do a study on what happened to most of their grandkids. Where are they? What happened to them? I'm not going to talk about it. It's hurtful to talk about it. But you're going to be surprised at what you're going to come at the results you're going to see. Do a study and come back and tell me what you find. جزاكم الله خير وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.